Welcome to this house of memory and hope. It is good to be together on this day. We start out with a command to all of you. Come down off of the ladder, wash out that paintbrush, shake out the sand from your shoes, get up off your muddy knees, and give the garden a morning off. Fold up the newspaper, turn off the coffee pot, close up your calendar already filled with dates and times and people and places that claim you. The church is ready for you to fill its rooms, to create its spirit, to generate its warmth, to kindle its light. The church is ready for you to make community, to create beauty, to bend it toward justice, to serve its ideals. The church is ready for you to be here, honoring our past, invigorating our present, and dreaming our future. Whoever you are and wherever you are on your life's journey, you are welcome here. This is your congregation of faith. Here we are home. Here we are whole. Let us begin. And let us sing the opening hymn, very familiar, Blue Boat Home. It's on page 1.
If you could sit in those 4 chairs right now, I'd really appreciate it, because what I'm going to show you is actually going to be up on the screen, okay? All right. Reverend Thomas, you can have a seat there as well. Marty? Now, this doesn't look like much of a picture, does it? It's just really strange. Well, believe it or not, this is a picture that was taken in outer space, way outer space. And if you look up in the corner here, right here, that's the edge of a planet. It's a planet. And it's a planet, it's one of the planets that has rings around it. Who knows which planet has rings around it? Yes. Okay, it's the planet Saturn. Saturn has rings around it. And those are the rings. You can see the rings there. And on the left, where it's dark, that's the planet. The reason why it's dark is that picture was taken when it was nighttime on that side of the planet, so it's dark. But if you look real carefully, you see this tiny little dot right here, right there? You know what that is? What is that? It's another planet, is correct. But guess what? It's your planet. That's what your planet looks like from millions of miles away in outer space. Just a tiny little dot in the sky. The same way that when you look up in the sky at night here, you can see little dots way up in the sky. You can see stars and other planets. That's what we look like from millions of miles in space. Marty? Now, this picture was taken from another planet. This was taken from a planet called the Red Planet. And the Red Planet is, guess which planet the Red Planet is? Anybody have any ideas? What's the Red Planet? Close, but it's not Mercury. Anybody else want to guess which the red planet? Mars. Bella guessed at Mars, and Mars is the answer. So we look out from Mars, and on the left here, you can see our planet, the planet Earth. And over to the right there, that's the moon. And that's our planet, and that's our moon. Now, when you look at this picture, what can you see about our planet? What?
Just like the moon feels the other side is
Exactly. It's the side facing the sun, both the moon and the Earth. That's where the light is, and on the other half of the planet, it's dark. That's nighttime. Bella? That's right. So that's why it rotates so that Sometimes it's night and sometimes it's daytime. But there's something else about this, about the planet Earth. Marty, the next picture. If you get closer, and this picture was actually taken from the moon by one of the astronauts that when people went to the moon. What about the color that you see on the color of the Earth? What's about the color?
On the earth,
Yeah,
it's like a white
white and blue. You know, we just sang a song about Blue Boat Home. The reason why we call it Blue Boat Home is because when you look at the Earth from outer space, it's blue. Do you know why it's blue? Bella, why is it blue? It's because of lakes and oceans. Most of the surface of our planet is actually covered with water. So,
more of our planet is, our planet has more water than land.
Aaron says it has more water than land, and he's right, and so is Bella. So when we talk about Blue Boat Home, this is why we call it that, is because when you look at our planet from outer space, it's blue, and it's our home. Marty? Now this picture was taken from a satellite a little further up, and this is our planet. This is your home. This is the only home you will ever have. And it is also the only home of everyone who has ever lived. And this is our neighborhood. The adults are going to be talking about neighborhood today. But when you look at our planet here, and by the way, if you look very carefully, you see where the red arrow is pointing? Okay, it's pointing to Santa Barbara. This is Santa Barbara is right where that arrow is. And you can actually see California and Baja California. See that funny looking piece of land that extends down to the right there? Yeah, that's Baja California in Mexico. But this is all we have. So your neighborhood, this is your neighborhood. And everybody on that planet right there is your neighbor. And it's the only neighborhood you'll ever have. And it's the only neighborhood anybody in this room will ever have. And you know what that means? We need to take care of it, because this is all we have. And there's no need to be afraid. It's a great big place, but it's our place, and it's our only place. And we're going to have to live here forever, okay? Don't mean to be scared. No need to be scared about it. But you need to know that. So you need to take care of our Blue Boat home, okay? Let's sing our children out to their RE classes with.
One of the advantages of being an interim minister is that you don't have to write a new sermon every week. And so, as has happened several times over these months that I've been here, I confess that this sermon is a rerun. And I want you to know that I accept the significance of truth in advertising. So actually, it was first delivered 20 years ago. So it's had plenty of time, like fine wine or cheese or maybe beef, to age over the... Listening to it in a way might be like watching an old Seinfeld episode, a rerun. But then again, none of you were there 20 years ago, so it's brand new. It really doesn't matter that it was done before. Like some of those old Seinfeld episodes, it's worth watching again occasionally, especially when you consider all the work it took to put it together in the first place. But it could also be compared to me trying to sell you a used car, let's say. And in this case, the product is a good one because many of the bugs have been worked out of the sermon over 20 years. And so, as they say in the used car business, this sermon is better than new. Maybe you've heard that before. But there's a reason why I'm resurrecting this sermon. It's something that I've been worrying about a lot. You might remember some of the course of sermons over these past months, and there are things going on in the world that make me worry. And mostly not really worry, but mostly I'm concerned about how it is that I respond to the things that go on in the world. I've been thinking about this whole sermon because I've been thinking about the way the world is. And for instance, this incident that's happening in Crimea right now. The Soviet Union fell apart so many years ago, and we remember what it was like to live in the Cold War era. And then we remember when the empire fell apart, that we all took a kind of a sigh of relief that things were going to be different now. Of course, as it turns out, there's still a lot of war in the world, and now it looks like the Soviet Union is trying to resurrect itself by bringing in some of the lands that used to belong to them. So war is with us, and I've spoken many times of how I wonder about that phenomenon of war and how it gets going and what are the variables of making it happen. And I mostly worry about my response to it and what I should do about it. I think that one of the fundamental aspects of the war phenomenon is a kind of mass psychology that happens when a group of people look at another group of people and think of them in a certain way. It is a kind of a mind trip because the official media says these people are the enemy and these people are our friends. And so we have to learn to deal with the enemy. And so this mind trip is put forth by the generals and the tacticians in the art of war, who spend untold millions of dollars in their so-called information service and in their misinformation service, talking about the enemy. Even the Pentagon understands that Americans have trouble just going out to war and start killing people. And so they spend a whole lot of time when people come into the military with the purpose of convincing their soldiers and training their soldiers on the necessity and the rationale to go out and kill the enemy. They actually have to fight against what many people are brought up with, which is the idea that you shouldn't even have a BB gun because it might put somebody's eyes out. To go from that attitude to saying, here is a gun, and the purpose of this is to aim it at your enemy and kill your enemy. And it takes a lot of dismantling of our kind of basic humanity in order to get to that place. But we've got to believe that the enemy is worth that dismantling of our humanity in order to kill them. We got to believe that the enemy is evil, perhaps even evil incarnate, Hitler-like or satanic. And nowadays, I'm sure you've noticed that many politicians, when they're talking about their political enemies, somehow end up always talking about Hitler. Say he's as bad as Hitler and the SS and the Gestapo. So I suppose that the pivot of all of this is that we have this humanity that we've been taught when we were coming up, especially if you came up in a kind of a religious community where many important parts of how we should act are talked about, the big one being that we should love our neighbors as ourselves and even love our enemies. And that's part of our makeup of humanity as we grow up. And I have to confess at this that I have a serious problem because Yeah, I'm a minister, and ministers are supposed to act a certain way and supposed to talk about a certain way. But the problem that I'm having is one that I think a lot of civilians have also, non-ministers. And I have to admit that when on one hand we have this setup of saying this is what we should do, and then on the other hand we have this setup that says this is what I actually end up doing. And this gulf between these two things of what my standard of behavior that I want to be is here, and then on this side is my standard of my real behavior. So we all want to do the right thing, and we think we know what the right thing is and what the wrong thing is. I think everybody in this room this morning wants to do good, wants to do right. And that's one of the reasons we come together on Sundays, to talk to each other and to listen to each other, keeping in mind the almighty question which we talk about nearly every Sunday here: how shall we live our lives day to day, here and now? And how can we come to terms with how we really live our lives compared to how we want to live our lives? In a way, the idea of worship, which is the shaping of the worth, the shaping of that which we find of great value, is what we do on Sunday mornings. And part of that great value is to try to be authentic and try to be true to our values. Through history, preachers have taken advantage of this idea of what they call sin, and they would say, either you do this or else that will happen to you. If you are a sinner, this is what's going to happen. The famous Puritan preacher Jonathan Edwards wrote a sermon which is so popular in our history. It was called "Sinners in the Hands of an Angry God." And we have heard that over the years. Inherent in this nasty game is the people's innocent and appropriate desire for the truth. And sometimes it's hard to find the truth, and sometimes it's hard to find the answers to these questions. And then when I get threatened by someone with eternal punishment, let's say, it messes up the whole thing. So I hear the great prophets say, love your neighbor as yourself. And I remember growing up back in Ohio at the Missionary Baptist Church Sunday School, and I remember hearing that phrase, to love your neighbor. And I remember thinking something like, well, I like my neighbor a lot, referring, of course, to the people who lived next door to me down on 122 Pfeiffer Avenue in Clyde, Ohio. To me, a neighbor was a neighbor, the people that lived next door. There was nothing symbolic about it, nothing metaphorical. Neighbors were the people who, if you yelled out your bedroom window, could hear you distinctly from their bedroom window. And when the 10th commandment ordered me not to covet my neighbor's wife, or my neighbor's manservant or maidservant, nor his ox, nor his horse, or anything that was my neighbor's, I knew exactly what that meant. I was not to desire anything that belonged to Mr. and Mrs. Lamson, who lived next door, including that great model train set that they had. But alas, I've grown up since then, and I've become more mature and more sophisticated in the way I see these things. And I realize that this problem of what I want and what I do is really coming into focus and has come into focus in my whole life. You see, I really did like my next door neighbors, the Lamsons, who I grew up with maybe for 18 years. We lived next to each other, and when I grew up and eventually moved to Berkeley and then to Seattle And then here in Goleta, I realized the Lampsons no longer live next door to me. Mr. Lampson died several years ago, and Mrs. Lampson remarried and finally died herself back in Ohio somewhere, and I have lost track of the 3 Lampson children. But I do know that none of them are my neighbors anymore. They're not in my life. They're only a memory. However, I will confess to you that I have known neighbors since then, and I remember one person who actually did live next door to me in Berkeley, and I remember that I not only didn't love him, I actually hated him. I really did. I hated the next door neighbor up there in Berkeley. And that feeling was not just a whimsical, fleeting sentiment I had toward him. I hated him for a long time, the whole time we were there. And here's the juicy part, I felt completely justified in my hating of my neighbor. He went out of his way, I believe, to earn my hatred of him. The story about how all that came down is complicated, but the bottom line is that I believe my hatred from him came from my belief that he did not care about me and take my needs into consideration. The specific point was he used to park in my parking space. And I tried to get him to not do that, and he kept doing it. And he was just a nasty guy. He did not love me. He did not regard me. He did not consider me. All he did was park his stupid car right in my way. On the other side of the coin, I can stand here and find honorable ways to hate people. For instance, over the recent history of the United States, back during the 2000s, I found myself hating the way the President of the United States was running our country. And this type of hatred is called righteous indignation. And I can remember that I had hatred for Karl Rove and for Dick Cheney and even the now deceased Fred Phelps. And of course, I didn't know any of these people personally. I only know of their actions, but those actions were enough to inspire my intense feeling. That type of hatred is righteous indignation, and I can say with some reassurance that some of these guys I hated for religious reasons. Imagine that, hating for religious reasons. But when it comes to the people who live next door, well, that's another thing. Bill Shakespeare talked about this. You did get that, didn't you? All right. I didn't want it to rush by without, picking up on it. Bill said, "An evil soul producing holy witness is like a villain with a smiling cheek, a goodly apple rotten at the heart. Oh, what a goodly outside falsehood hath." So here I am, a minister. I'm supposed to talk about the high standards of human moral behavior, about the soaring possibilities of the best which humankind can create. But I see that I have entered a profession which by its very nature lends itself to contradictions, because no matter what I say, and whether I like it or not, I'm continually setting myself up for someone to say, "A goodly apple rotten at the heart." And they can point to my behavior and say, "Don't pay any attention to that guy. You should see what he does, da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da." And I set myself up for that by saying, "Here's what you should do, folks. You should go out and do this and this and this." And I'm, doing my thing. I'm talking about high moral standards like loving your neighbor for Christ's sake. Literally, for Christ's sake. So I tremble in my ministerial boots because I can see right away that when I'm hating someone, no matter how deservedly, I'm violating my own standards. And I'm violating the standards that I'm giving to other people in a position of authority. Say, you should do this. I do believe all of those gushy words about love, and last week we read the book of Corinthians, the 13th chapter. You know, there are these three: faith, hope, and love, and the greatest of these is love. But I still remember that guy in Berkeley, and I can't get him out of my mind. And I still do not love him all these miles away. And I remember all those other people in my life whom I don't love, often people I've known quite well, and I'm especially concerned about the ones I do know quite well. So in your order of service today, it says the line from Samuel Johnson, what is nearest touches us most. The passions rise higher at domestic than at imperial tragedies. We're talking about your next door neighbor. And another word, perhaps more telling of all, is the wisdom from the Roman philosopher Horace, who said, your own safety is at stake when your neighbor's house is in flames. Your own safety is at stake when your neighbor's house is in flames. So it really does make a difference about your next door neighbor and your relationship to them. So my next move, what I can do, is to keep on trying and to keep on looking and to keep on rising my expectations of what I can do. And then when I find that I can't do something, I try to rise up with the energy and the effort and the efficiency of that energy and effort in order to reach the very goals that I have set. The issue is I want to be better than I am. I want to be better than I am. I want to do better than I am doing. To have more faith, to have more hope, but most of all to experience what Brian Swim, the great physicist, called the allurement of the universe, which he called eros, true and genuine and all-powerful, the cosmic word for love. Love ignites all being, Brian declares. Yes, I want more of that. So may we, like Rebecca Parker, choose to bless the world and to not curse the world, now and always, in a world without end, forever and ever. Amen. Oh, I forgot those pictures. Which picture is it? Oh, yeah, that's true. That's a true thing.